به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فأصدق الحديث كتاب الله سبحانه وخير هدي رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Brothers and sisters, as we begin this beautiful Friday that Allah Azza wa Jal sends down upon us rain, providing for His creation as a whole and quenching the thirst of the land, cooling the temperatures for us, we ask Him Jalla wa Ala that He send down His mercy and His healing upon us as a whole too. Allahumma ameen. Today, Ahibbati, as we continue focusing on the aspect of suicide and depression, or mental health rather, we focus on three particular major mental health disorders, and they are depression, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. And before we begin, I want to remind us of a statement of the Sahabi Hudhayfa radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And the statement of his, Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah has declared it to be sahih. Hudhayfa radiyallahu anhu said, كان الناس يسألون رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الخير. He said that the people would ask the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam about good things. وَكُنْتُ أَسْأَلُهُ عَنِ الشَّرِّ. He says, but I used to ask him about that which was evil, that which was bad, that which could be harmful and dangerous. Why? مَخَافَةً أَن يُدْرِكَنِي. Out of fear that it would somehow affect me, afflict me, reach me. And it is from this point of view, brothers and sisters, that we are focusing on these aspects, because we need to live with awareness, we need to have knowledge. It is not at all from Islam for us to think that, well, if I isolate myself or if I keep myself ignorant, then whatever it is will never befall me. It can never afflict me. I will be safe. That's the biggest mistake and myth that you can hold. Rather, it's the opposite. And this is from the guidance of the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim. And nobody, not even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said to Hudhayfa, Ya Hudhayfa, that is a mistake. No, he would answer his questions. And so I would hope and pray that, Ahibbati, as we are learning, and today as we cover these three main, doesn't mean the only, but three main forms of mental illness, that we take it to heart. And that in taking it to heart, we better help ourselves and those that we love, as well as allowing for those who love us also to help us. As we'll come to see that all of these three illnesses, and other than them, play a major role in suicide. And once again, when we talk about this topic of suicide, we must understand that it is an act of intentionally causing one's own death. And another definition or understanding for it is not that a person may necessarily want to kill themselves, as much as they may be indifferent and they just want to die. They no longer want to live. And depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, personality disorders, and substance abuse are risk factors. More than 90% of people who commit suicide have diagnosable mental health problems, research shows. But the act itself is very often the response of, listen to this, a stressed out, troubled person to a momentary crisis. And when sometimes you feel as though pours, when it rains, as though it's not one problem, that it's so many, and maybe you feel like you're being crushed. Shaitan can really work on a person such that he can bring them even further down and bring them to the point of where either they hurt themselves or they become indifferent to the loss of their own life. Depression, brothers and sisters. Among the definitions, it's a condition of general emotional dejection, meaning extreme sadness and withdrawal. The symptoms are low mood, low self-esteem, loss of interest, low energy, pain without a clear cause, intense sadness that lasts for more than 2 to 3 weeks, accompanying with a sense of feeling very sad and even feeling empty. And as we're going through this, perhaps we go through this process and we look at ourselves and say, you know what, I feel as though maybe one of those symptoms is something I've had to maybe deal with, or somebody that I know and love has mentioned something of this and that. And I think that part of what I hope we'll all come to recognize is that, yes, a lot of these things are very prevalent, they are very common. And in being able to identify, having knowledge, we know that knowledge is for action in Islam, and bi'idhnillahi azza wa jal, we can utilize that knowledge in a beneficial way to help, to make things better. Depression tends to cause people to lose motivation. Rather than making them think more clearly, people with depression show diminished cognitive functioning on several domains. So when somebody's depressed, they're not themselves, and they're certainly not the best part of themselves. They struggle with life. They struggle to function on a regular daily basis. They think very poorly of themselves. Their outlook on life is also very dismal. They're indifferent, and perhaps even at times will think as though maybe they're causing trouble for people and that people would be happier and better off without them. It's said that the onset for this is somewhere in the 20s throughout the 30s. SubhanAllah, it makes you wonder whether or not the different social stage that people are in during that time, if that has something to do with it. What do you typically associate 20s with? A person who is finishing up college, who is moving on to something of a career, who is perhaps somewhere in that stage of starting family, perhaps their parents are older. They have all of these different scenarios, and they're struggling to kind of understand where they are and what they should be doing and roles and responsibilities, especially as Muslims. When we think about ourselves, we don't think about relationships when it comes to our parents, when it comes to our spouses, when it comes to our children, when it comes to each other. We think about rules, responsibilities. Well, subhanAllah, when you live life having to always focus on rules and responsibilities and this sense of accountability, it can be pretty stressful. But when there is love, because it's a relationship, wallahi, you know that small things can easily be overlooked. This is why all too often people are really stressed out and they're depressed, because too much of the small stuff is being sweated, it's being focused on, it's being made into major issues when they're actually quite small. Risk factors are family history, major life changes, certain medications, chronic health problems, and even substance abuse. And it's also believed that a combination of genetic and environmental factors play a big role, as well as even psychological. Now, subhanAllah, we don't know by family history how much of it is a genetic aspect and how much of it is perhaps maybe learned because of growing up within a family, being within a home where you see, for example, whoever it may be of the parent being depressed. You pick up things. Children are sponges. And this is why part of the obligation that we have to Allah Azza wa Jalla and to each other as family is that we are ourselves healthy, happy, and that the home is also this healthy, happy place. We are blessed with iman, we are blessed with guidance, we are blessed with each other, we are blessed with gifts that we can never count. It says major depressive disorder can negatively affect a person's personal life, work life, education, as well as their sleeping, eating habits, and their general health. Between 2 to 8% of adults with major depression die by suicide. And about 50% of people who die by suicide had depression or another mood disorder. So depression is something that we want to take seriously. We want to pay attention to it. We want to address it. And the last thing we want to do, ahibba, is be cruel and hard-hearted. Where we look at the person who's struggling and say, "You're a weakling. What's wrong with you? You have everything and yet look at you, how you're so weak, and I was like this and I struggled, and look at me and look at you." And when somebody is already low like that, the last thing you want to do is kick them and stomp on them. Brothers, family, brotherhood, sisterhood should be love. And when somebody's down and they've hit rock bottom, the last thing you want to do is spit on them. You want to stretch your hand out in love and support and help them to heal, to get better. Because if there's anything that any of us can affirm to in life, is that life is circular in many ways. Sometimes you're on the top, and other times you could be on the bottom. Sometimes you could be on the dishing out end or the giving end, and at the other time you can be on the receiving end. And we want to make sure that we live with that beautiful principle, kama tudinu tudan, that as you do will be done to you, and we want to be as beautiful as we can, following that golden rule. None of you really believes until you really love for your brother what you love for yourself, and the opposite is true, that you hate for your brother what you also hate for yourself. The second is bipolar disorder. The definition for this is an emotional disorder characterized by periods of mania or great excitement, alternating with periods of extreme depression, usually interspersed with relatively long intervals of normal mood. So this is a person who bounces back between two extremes. They're like so happy, they're euphoric. And when they're like that, they're not thinking clearly. They're not thinking about consequences because they feel like they're on top of the world. And that's when a lot of the times these folks will engage in really self-destructive behavior because they feel so good, it's as though, wow, what a feeling. And that's when they'll get involved perhaps with something of substances and alcohol and drugs and sexual promiscuity and living on the edge and who knows what of stuff. And then all of a sudden, boom, they fall down to the bottom. And you can imagine, or you should try to imagine, those two extremes, that you're up here and then all of a sudden it's as though you've fallen from the sky and you've hit the earth hard. And how horrible it must feel, especially when you're comparing it to having been up here. So these folks, these people, we ask that Allah heal all of us and heal all of them. Their roller coaster ride is a very severe one. And in between that, there are these periods of being what you would perhaps consider normal. They're happy, they get very angry. And it's almost as though even the triggers for these things are abnormal. Where it's not for something that really deserves, mashallah, tabarakallah, that a person is yelling out, Allahu Akbar, and they're so happy. It was something that maybe you would say, okay, seems a bit extreme or irrational, but okay. And on the same hand, with regards to the reasons that they'll get upset for, and they'll get crazy for, and they'll it's like, what's wrong? Calm down. Why are you? So that sense of self-control, they're swinging like an accordion, like a swing between this and that. And it said that these symptoms, they usually onset somewhere around 25 years old. SubhanAllah, once again, that same range approximately. What is it? Why? Allah knows best. Some risk factors, it says, although the causes are not clearly understood, right? But both environmental and genetic factors play a role. Of them, family history, childhood abuse, and long-term stress. Again, that issue with family history, how much of it is the genetics aspect of it? How much of it is perhaps learned? Subconsciously stuff that is picked up that we perceive to be normal. This is the way my father was. I turned out just like my father. Or that's the way my mother was. I can't help but be like my mother. How much of it is really genetics and how much of it is just learned behavior? Allah knows best. But childhood abuse, and this is something that as Muslims we must all have an obligation to, and that is to protect children. To make sure that children are safe. We ask that Allah Azza wa Jalla protect children everywhere because every child should be safe. No one should ever stretch a finger with anything of ill or evil within their hearts or minds towards a child. And Allah knows best that perhaps it may be that somebody as a child was abused and now that they're an adult and maybe and it's resurfacing somehow. Triggers, who knows what. Long-term stress. Long-term stress like what? Wallahi, sometimes brothers, and I pray that Allah Azza wa Jalla bless us to be merciful to our children. Some parents, with regards to the demands that they have on their kids, that if their children don't get 100 on every single test, they're not having it. Could you imagine being perfect all the time? And could you imagine that when you're not, the repercussions of how a parent will treat that child? Quiz after quiz, test after test, assignment after assignment, final after final, class after class, year after year. Wallahi, Allah doesn't tabarak wa ta'ala put those demands on us. And it just may be that sometimes a person snaps. And I'm mentioning that as an example among examples. And of them, unfortunately, is sometimes the memorization of Quran. Every one of us wants our children to memorize Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala's beautiful book. But the means do not justify the ends. If and when our children are being not just forced, but being perhaps abused, wallahi, it's not worth it. You can brag and boast to say, yes, mashallah, my child, my daughter, my son is a hafidah. But if in their heart the only association that they have with the book of Allah Azza wa Jal is punishment, is pain, wallahi, I know of circumstances myself where brothers who have gotten through it because they've spoken to their parents and said they are hurting me, they are doing this to me, and the parents said, you will finish that. And they realized that they could not get anything of the protection from their parents whose job it is to protect their children from being harmed. That the only way to get out of it was to go through it. And in the end, when they finished with the Quran and their parents were able to brag, they threw the Quran in the garbage and they left Islam. It's not what Allah wants from us. La ikraha fi deen. Us being Allah's slaves and servants is a relationship of love. It is not one of punishment. It is not one of fear. It is not one of... It's out of love. And individuals, we're told, often make poorly thought out decisions with little regard to the consequences because of unrealistic thought processes. The need for sleep is usually reduced during manic phases. And they could also be highly irate and angry with those not at their level. And during periods of depression, there may be crying, a negative outlook on life, poor eye contact with others. Listen to this, the risk of suicide among those with this illness is high, at greater than 6%. And this is what they discovered over a 20-year study. So this one is actually higher than depression with regards to being a reason for suicide. It says while self-harm occurs in 30 to 40%, And other mental health issues such as anxiety disorders and substance abuse disorder are commonly associated with bipolar disorder. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Brothers and sisters, if we could just once again move in and fill in gaps and spaces, please. Let's accommodate each other, please. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama taslima kathiran wa ba'd. Ahibati, the third and final one that we will focus on of mental illness is schizophrenia. And the definition is a severe mental disorder characterized by some, but not necessarily all, of the following features: emotional expressionless, intellectual deterioration, social isolation, disorganized speech and behavior, delusions and hallucinations. Regarding the symptoms, it said that schizophrenia is a mental disorder characterized by abnormal behavior and failure to understand reality. Common symptoms include false beliefs, unclear or confused thinking, hearing voices that others do not, reduced social engagement and emotional expression, and the lack of motivation. People with schizophrenia often have additional mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, or substance abuse disorders. Symptoms typically come on gradually, beginning in young adulthood, and they typically last a long time. Among the symptoms are that they have strange and bizarre delusions, hallucinations of what they can hear and see and experience that nobody else around them can. For example, that as they are watching TV, they may say that an alien is communicating to them through the TV and has a special message just for them. Or that there is XYZ of something, but nobody else can see it, nobody else is experiencing it except for that person. And they're not able to distinguish between reality and what they are experiencing of those hallucinations. This can be very scary. Folks like this could also be very paranoid. And the onset for this is also early adulthood. Risk factors, it said that the causes of schizophrenia include environmental and genetic factors. Possible environmental factors include being raised in a city. Somebody may say, what's that? How? And I actually called up a psychologist, Dr. Ray, Allah bless him, and asked him, how is that? What does this mean? He said, yes, because typically living in a city shows an increase of stress in the lifestyle. So the bigger the city life and the more hectic and stressful it is, it seems that there's a direct correlation in relationship. As well as cannabis use during adolescence, and this one's something for people to pay attention to. What is that saying? It means that someone who smokes marijuana as a young adult, that they're also showing there's a correlation between smoking marijuana and schizophrenia. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, you don't want to touch these things. Because the trade-off is something that in your worst nightmares you don't ever want to experience it. Because some of these hallucinations that people have are so scary that most of the time for Muslims they think there has to be some demon possession. Because these folks will say that they see demons and there's blood and they're being attacked and all sorts of scary things. You want to smoke some weed? Chill out, relax, be cool. Can't resist the peer pressure? Wallahi, brothers and sisters, for $1 million, you don't want to put yourself in the shoes of it ever being that schizophrenia is in your future. And if that's for marijuana, which is considered to be, in normal people's terms, not addicting in the way that they claim, that it's safe in the way that they claim, that it's medicinal in the way that they claim, well, what about the stuff that's worse than that? What about the K2 and all this other stuff where they throw in all sorts of different concoctions of who knows what? Wallahi, brothers and sisters, regardless of what the fear or circumstances may be, run away from the drugs, run away from the alcohol, run away from anything that opens up that door as though it was the angel of death staring you down. And it's also said, among the risk factors are certain infections, and Allah knows best what those are. It would be great that if we have those of our brothers and sisters in the medical field that they can better help us out with that would be fantastic. Parental age. Parental age, among what was mentioned, is if there is an older father. So subhanAllah, even though in men, our semen or our sperm is something that is renewed. It's not like with women that they have those set eggs and they age with them. But yet with that it still appears that age affects us. And that a person who is older in age as a father, what does older in age mean? I don't know. That's where again I ask our brothers and sisters in the medical field to help us. And if and when there is, they're claiming that may also have something to do with it, as well as poor nutrition during pregnancy. It's also said that stress is believed to be a major factor for causing that person to snap and break. And if we think about how many demands there are upon us in life these days, there's many. There are many. And this is where, at least in the home, it should be a place of healing, a place of love, a place of mercy. And that we're not stressing each other out, that we're working together as a team, that we're not frustrating each other, that everybody plays a role, that they are contributing in the family. That when parents are saying to children, please put away your shoes when you come in from home, when you're coming home from wherever you may be, that children are going to take the shoes and they're going to put them there. They're not going to say, why are you keep making a big deal out of this? Jama'ah, simple things, let's learn. Let's not cause each other frustration. Or that the wife, she didn't put the salt or the quantity of spice inside your food. Habibi, get it and add it yourself. Let us not stress each other out. Because nobody knows when and how a person can snap. How that can change them in a way that... And it said that life expectancy is 18 to 20 years shorter for people who have schizophrenia due to increases in suicide, as well as heart failure and lifestyle diseases. Heart diseases, failure, as well as lifestyle diseases. Brothers and sisters, I conclude and I remind us of what Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling us when He says, Tabarak wa Ta'ala, يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة عليها ملائكة غلاظ شداد لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. O you who believe, protect yourselves and your families from the fire of hell, whose fuel is people and stones, over which are appointed angels harsh and severe. They do not disobey Allah Azza wa Jalla what He commands, but they do exactly as they were commanded. Let us work on saving ourselves and as a family, working together to protect each other, to save each other as a community. Saving each other from that which can harm us in this life as well as the next. I pray that Allah bless us to be from those who are truly saved in this life and the next. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad. كما صليت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد.